Yeah, right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started right on the dot at 6 p.m. So tonight's forum will last till 7 p.m. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can. And the forum tonight is hosted by the Grants Pass and Josephine County Chamber of Commerce and the Daily Courier. Tonight, I will be moderating the event, Josie Malloy. I'm the president and CEO for the Grants Pass and Josephine County Chamber of Commerce. And all of tonight's questions and answers will be recorded, and it is also live streaming on the Chamber's YouTube channel right now. So thank you for everyone attending in person and also online. And so we're first going to introduce all the candidates. So when I say your name, if you would please raise your hand. So in Ward 1, we have Clint Scherf. We also have Rob Pell in Ward 1. In Ward 3, we have Kurt Collins and Dwayne Younker. And then in Ward 4, we have Joel King and Molly Nichols. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and we are only covering the contested races. So to begin with, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an introduction. Then we'll get into the questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the question, and then we'll close with 2 minutes for each candidate for closing comments. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with Kurt Collins for your introduction.
Okay, hello folks. I'm Kurt Collins. I'm a resident here since 1986. Moved here from San Jose, and I did not register to vote the first few years because I felt like I didn't really have a right to vote until I had been here a while and kind of understood the situation. So, full transparency, when I registered, I was a Republican. I'd been a Republican for a number of years. About 1994, things changed for me, and I won't say that I left the party actually left me, and I registered as an independent and have been ever since. I've worked a number of places here. My last job, I retired as Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Pacific Crest Transformers. I also worked at Met One out in Merlin. I worked at Environmental Container Systems, which was a defense contractor. So I've done a lot of things. I've worked in the radio for about 10 years. So talking is something that I've done a lot of. In later years, I think I've become more introspective, and I try to be a better listener. Ironically, tonight, my right ear is a little clogged up, and so I may have to ask you to repeat something, but anyway, I'm a straight shooter, not a BSer, and you'll get an honest answer out of me whether it's good for me or not. So I look forward to the opportunity here. I think it's good to question everybody about this because I really don't know why anybody would want to be a city councilor. Okay.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder, when the yellow light comes on, that means you have 30 seconds to wrap it up. And when it turned red, please stop and we'll move on to the next candidate. So Rob Pell, you are next for your 2-minute introduction.
Hi, I'm Rob Pell. I'm current city councilor in Ward 1. I've been in Grants Pass 27 years and run a downtown retail business. I have literally thousands of people go through my store every month, and that, plus being on city council, really gives me an ear to what the public is thinking. I have extreme, we'll say conservatives and liberals that come through my store, and I actually have a really broad range of views that I'm familiar with. I will acknowledge I have a vested interest in having Grants Pass be as good as it can be. My kids and grandkids, I have, well, let's say 4 grandkids and 2 kids who currently live in Grants Pass area, and the present and the future of their lives is to some degree dependent on the job that I do as city councilor. So I do have a vested interest in that regard. You know, I've been active in Grants Pass government and community affairs for over 25 years, far longer than anybody who's been on the city council. That means that 25 years ago, I was standing at the podium for my 3 minutes, talking about a variety of different subjects, and have over the years written lots of letters to the editor. And I've worked for those years, I believe, trying to make specifically my downtown area, which is where my business is, a better place for shoppers and a better experience, and a good place for the other shop owners. I think that I have a unique and valuable perspective on what's needed. I also know what's been tried, what probably should not be repeated, and wisely where we shouldn't spend money on things that have essentially already been decided years ago. So I think that my experience and perspective is large and broad, and I think that that will help in the next 4 years as well.
All right, thank you, Rob. And Molly Nichols.
Thank you. I'm Molly Nichols. I am a local real estate broker. I have been for 10 years. I have lived in Josephine County for about 25 years, moving from Valdez, Alaska before that. Like Rob, I get to work with many different people from many different views and walks of life. Gives me a very unique perspective. As a real estate agent, Is that better? As a real estate agent, all right. I have to navigate all of those different personalities and views and work cooperatively with them and for them to successfully negotiate their contracts. That gives me a unique advantage that most people on our current council don't have, which is the ability to work across the table from pretty much anyone and come out with a positive outcome for all involved. I also have a pretty heavily vested interest in our current housing and job market, as I have 2 young adults entering into those venues. And I am running for council based on those interests and in moving our community towards a more equitable space for everybody that's here. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Did you want to add anything else?
That was it.
All right, thank you. And Joel King.
I'm Joel King. I've lived in Josephine County for approximately 40 years. Sometimes I have to ask my wife that. We raised our 3 kids here. They graduated from Grants Pass High School, and they've all gone on to successful lives because Grants Pass prepared them very well. My education, I got a Bachelor of Science in Forest Management with a minor in Economics. I got a Master of Science in the Soil Chemistry and Physics with a minor in Watershed Management and Economics from Oregon State University. In my employment history, I've had a great career with the United States Forest Service. I've worked as an economist, a government economist, received awards at the national level, a contract administrator, district ranger at High Cascades, Prospect and Butte Falls, timber management down in Ashland, and a district ranger at Wild Rivers out in Cave Junction. So I've worked all throughout Southwest Oregon, including the magnificent town of Powers and Gold Beach. I just thought I'd tell a little bit about myself through the accomplishments of what's happened since I've been on council. We supported Foundry Village and got that going. That was the previous council. It wasn't this council that did that. We also stepped up to the plate when Rogue Retreat has some operational problems to cover the operational expenses for this year. I'll save the rest of the accomplishments for our closing comment. I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Josie and the Grants Pass Courier, for sponsoring this. It's a democracy.
Thank you. And Clint Scherf.
Good evening. My name is Clint Scherf. I was born and raised in Grants Pass here. I'm actually currently raising the fourth generation of my namesake here. My grandfather and my father, previous of us. I'm a small businessman. I own and operate a small engineering firm that deals directly with... How about I turn the mic on? Sorry about that, guys. I run a small business that deals with within the land development industry, so I have a very strong grasp on municipal codes and building codes in pretty much any area. I currently serve on the Urban Area Planning Commission. I have served on that commission previous of my 2 years that I served as the town councilor. And I've come back to the table to see if I can serve the community again. I believe that a town councilor, local government should listen to its community. I believe it should protect its community. And I believe that it should provide economic support for economic growth so those citizens can actually prosper. I believe that I can be a voice for the community because I listen to the community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Dwayne Younker.
Hello, I'm Dwayne Younker. I've been a resident here for almost 40 years. I was raised here. Been to the school system here, graduated high school here. Served my country for 21 years. Came back here, actually I recruited here a couple times too, so I've been around here a long time. Have two brothers that grew up in the same community, so I know a lot of people here. I look at Grants Pass as this has always been my home, only place I've ever voted in. So I have a vested interest here. I have kids that are adults and a couple still left in high school. So I want this community to, to be the same when I grew up here for my kids. I definitely running because I feel there's a decline of things going on in this community. It's not the same community that I grew up in. I used to be safe here. I used to be riding my bike everywhere in this town. That's not the case. I wouldn't let my kids play in the parks here right now. It's not safe. So I feel there's a steady decline of what's going on here, and that's why I put my name in the hat. I feel that I'm the person that helped change things here. And that's why I feel that the next 4 years, when I do win, I'll be able to help change the city and where it's going. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move into the questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the questions. So we're going to start with you, Rob Pell, and the first question is, as a city councilor, what would your primary roles be?
Primary role as a city councilor is to listen to what the public has to say, what the main concerns are, and essentially formulate policy or strategy to address those concerns. We do that a number of different ways. During strategic planning in February, the entire council gets together and we, through essentially a very democratic process, we vote on which issues we are going to try to address and focus on in the coming year. Those are typically based on, or often based on, surveys, public surveys. They're based on surveys that come from our city commissions and committees, and they are also based on the interest of different councilors. So taking those three essentially avenues of input, we then come up, we, meaning the entire council and the mayor, with the staff present to answer questions and help us, we come up with what our goals for the coming year are. At that point, we continue to listen to our committees and commissions and the public and each other, and we try to get done what our goals are and what we need to accomplish. Very often, we also have to put out, quote unquote, put out fires about any urgent matters that come up, and there are a lot of those. So we do a lot of different things. We do things on the fly, and we also do things in a very deliberate and planned way.
All right, great, thank you. And Molly Nichols. Yes, as a city councilor, what would your primary roles be?
As a city councilor, I think the primary role is to lead the constituents after listening to the constituents, to identify the needs and desires of the community as a whole, and to work towards equitable goals, to it's a hard question to answer. To develop economic strategies that can move our community towards more affordable housing, towards more growth. Our role in the community or in the council would be to basically lead.
And you still have 30 seconds.
Okay. I think that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Joel King?
Well, I think it's really clear what the role of a city councilor is. I better put on my glasses. One is to set policy. It's not to direct day-to-day operations. It's not to supervise city employees. It's to set policy and let the employees do their work and let the city manager manage. It's also about setting priorities. And those priorities are during the budget process, and they can also show up during the course of the year where we look at those different priorities and decide because there's not enough resources to get everything done. The last thing that I would have here is to listen and facilitate. So as we go through changes, conflicts are inevitable. And conflicts, whether it's due to a perception of scarcity in resources or people, or whether it's due to power struggles, or whether it's due to a change, we have to confront those conflicts and use them. We need them to make things even better. And so the council people need to be able to listen to all the community, not just those that would agree with my personal view, and confront those conflicts in a positive manner and facilitate positive answers as we move into the future.
Thank you. And Clint Scherf?
Thank you. The primary role of the counselor, I believe, is to facilitate a community that the citizens can thrive in. The council should protect the community, should provide safe environment for the community. You should always listen to the community. Providing them with opportunities for their own personal growth and economic growth is key points. Things that I don't think counselors' primary role is to push their own agenda. Should be listening to the community and making your decisions and actions in the best way that you can to address the community's needs. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And Dwayne Younker?
I think the counselors should always listen to the people. They're our boss. They voted for us. They feel that I'm the best person for the job, if elected, to run, not run the city, but make the big decisions to help the people that are managing the city. I don't want to be the manager, I don't want to be the chief of police, I don't want to be the city, anything. I just want to help facilitate, make things better for the people here. I want to listen to the people here. I want to address the issues. I want to help the city grow in a positive way. And I want people to be happy that Grants Pass is the place for their home. Those are the issues I think the city council should look on. And I don't think that's been happening lately here. They're not listening to the public, and I want to change that.
All right, thank you. And we'll finish it up with Kirk Collins.
Great, put me at the end on this question. I'll dovetail onto what Joel said, because the functional role of the council is really to manage the city, to make policy, and to look at the resources, determine the service level, and determine how to distribute those resources to achieve that service level. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. We don't micromanage anything, but we do manage the city manager. Ultimately, the council is responsible to its constituents, and we do listen, and we're all in the public frequently, and I think the other role is that when we do make a decision, we as the counselors need to advocate for that decision because, as Joel said, there's always going to be conflict. And I feel we need to be able to go out and talk to people and have them understand why a decision was made the way it was. And so advocacy is important. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And we're going to move to the next question, and we'll be starting with you, Molly. What qualifications do you have for this position?
The qualifications I have for this position is, one, I care about our community deeply. I understand the sense of community that we all hold. Being a real estate broker has given me 10 years of negotiating experience. It has given me the ability to work with all types of people. It has given me not public speaking ability, obviously, but it has given me a deep sense of community. I move new people here every week, and I understand what they are looking for in a community, and I understand where we are currently lacking and where we can work together with our commissioners, with our manager, with our fellow council members in a more constructive way to build a better community for all of us, including the new incoming community members.
Great, thank you. And Joel King?
Well, I've been blessed with a history, I guess, of service, first with the Forest Service for 35 years in those different positions that I served. A lot of that had to deal with controversial public input. A lot of it had to deal with management of wildfires and dealing with overhead teams and people where I was the administrative officer in charge of both the strategy and the results. One of the unique things that I have that really benefits me is my wife, Dr. Moline. She worked with Dr. Moline, and then when Dr. Moline had a stroke, he sold his medical practice to my wife. And that's the time I retired from the Forest Service, so we had our own private business for 10 years with, I don't know how many patients. I started off with way too many, but then I think we ended up with 1,500 patients for primary care. And operating a private business like that gave me that perspective that added to my public service, and that's been really invaluable.
Great, thank you. Clint?
Qualifications for this position. I currently have 20 years experience helping my clients navigate municipal code, local jurisdiction, and permitting processes for land development. 9 times out of 10, I'm on that side of the fence, and I'm arguing to local government. I spent some time on the Urban Area Planning Commission when, in about 2018, shortly afterwards, I actually sat up in this chair as a town councilor for 2 years. And I am currently serving on the Urban Area Planning Commission. I do have an astute knowledge of navigating through and interpreting building code, municipal code, and I know the ins and outs on how local government and smaller cities, which quote, we're not a small city, but I still feel that we're a rural, small city. I have an abundance of experience in navigating through that, so I would like to bring that back to the table and help my community grow and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne?
I think I bring a lot of things to the table here. For one thing, I love this place. I wouldn't have retired here. I retired from the military here. I could have went anywhere else in the world, but I came back here. As a child, I know what it's like to be a kid here, adult here, so I know what both sides are for the community. I have kids here, so I have a vested interest there. My wife's a teacher, so I have that interaction with other people, obviously through my wife too. You know, in my military time, for 21 years, I've led so many people, motivate people. I'm gonna take that experience and move it into the city council and learn how to motivate maybe my other council people or the city people to make Grants Pass great. And I think I'm the right person for that, with all those skills that I'm bringing with my military experience and my 5 years of being a realtor and working with different types of people out there.
All right, thank you. And Kurt?
Okay, I'm going to give you a kind of a whiplash answer here. First off, as I said, I was the Vice President, Sales and Marketing at Pacific Crest Transformers, and during my time there, I grew that business from 30 million up to 50 million. And I was responsible for that $50 million budget as well. But in all the success that I've had in business, I'm just going to say that has zero relevance to governance. The metrics are completely different. But I think I've showed that I make good decisions. I understand the options that are afforded to me, and then I make good decisions. And, you know, that's what we have to do up here. We spend a lot of time researching and understanding things, and we make good decisions. And that's all I can hope for my kids, that they grow up and make good decisions, and that's what I'm here for.
Thank you. And Rob?
I think that first and foremost, what I bring to the table here is that I'm a private sector guy. And very often in the last several decades, we've had way too many retired government employees on the city council. I'm also a working person. I work 5 to 6 days a week. And we've had too many retired people, in my opinion. We don't have perspective of someone who really wants to get things done in the most efficient way possible, because that's not always how government works. So that's a perspective that I bring, and I actually have some ideas maybe that I'll share later as to how we can streamline and make more efficient some of our policies for next year. I'm an independent thinker. I voted for and against every person or for and with, I should say, or with and against any person who's been on the council on a variety of different issues. It's no surprise, and I'm a registered independent. I don't really care what side of the aisle somebody's on, what color hat they wear, or whether they believe in COVID vax mandates. If they come up with a good idea that is financially feasible, I'm willing to embrace it and work and help them work to make it policy. So I want to get things done because, again, that's what you do in the private sector. Without that, you starve. So you're either productive or you're not. And I want to make the city council more productive, and I have some ideas I feel that will help facilitate that next year.
All right, thank you. And take the knife out of my back. And now we will move on to the next question. We'll be starting with you, Joel. How would you recommend the city handle the current affordable housing crisis?
It's a great question. It's caused by a lack of land. Our LCDC laws have limited the amount of land that's developed in our country or in our county. Federal land is up to over 50% of our land base, so you can't build homes on over 50% of the county. And then our terrain is somewhat mountainous, which further limits the amount of land available on which to build homes. Economically, we have a lot of people moving up from California that sell their homes for twice what it's worth here. And so you have a demand that drives up prices, and they bring up cash. And then they put the rest of the money in the bank, and our banks have the highest rate of deposits of any county in the state because of that. So you have people that come up with cash that pay the higher prices, and it's lower than where they came from, and then you have a lack of land on which to develop. So we got several strikes against us to start with. So there's 8 specific measures I have here. We focus on relationships. We leverage partnerships with housing authority. We simplify the codes. A lot of these things we've already done. We got HUD Medicaid funding, which is new. We got the Oregon Housing Commission that we can call on. There's even the vets. We got system development charge incentives. We need developer property management and service relationships. We got land banks that we can call land trusts with bank reinvestments. And I could go on for 2 more, but I won't.
All right, thank you. And Clint?
Yes, so again, I look at these topics from different angles from the people that are currently serving and have served in the past. At this point, Grants Pass needs economic development to get people jobs so they can afford a house. There's long past where we've used other facilities, other organizations to help us with our economic growth, our economic development, to bring in businesses. Some of those cities or some of those organizations, not to disparage them whatsoever, but they're spread thin. They're actually juggling all different counties. We need to take this burden on ourselves. We need to promote economic growth. We need to get businesses to come in here. We have too many industrial, commercial areas that are not filled. There is not enough jobs for people so they can afford a house. Yes, we have a pinch on land, but when you're talking about people not having money to buy a house, we need to provide economic growth and give them some jobs.
Thank you. Dwayne?
That is a great question because it comes up a lot, especially in my family. I have a 24-year-old and a 20-year-old. Where are they going to live? Hopefully not in my house forever. I would say that. We have definitely not looked to growth in this county and city, I would say, since the 80s. We have not tackled that. The mills are gone. That was where my dad worked, the mills. We've got that land out there, and it just sits there. Spalding's empty. Why aren't we moving forward and making jobs that can afford a house here? I don't think we're going to change Californians from moving here. It's been happening my whole life here, and it's still happening. Most of my clients are Californians. They obviously love it here, so I'm not going to change that. But how do we make people that need to raise their family here be able to afford here? One is give them the power to make the money to afford here, because I don't think we're going to bring the housing down. We might be able to bring down the cost of applications to get the house built, but we don't control the building prices. The wood is controlled by the open market. So those things we definitely can't afford, we can't change, but we can change things in the planning department, make it easier. We can push to bring people here that are going to bring jobs, and I think those are the ways. I don't want any more, not to say Walmart's great for people, but it's not the living wage job.
Great, thank you. Kurt?
Okay, the housing question is a complex one, as Joel has pointed out. And I agree with what Clint says. We need more jobs. And I've worked in manufacturing companies, and I know it's very difficult. If we were to go and find one that would want to move here, he would need to bring a bunch of employees with him because we don't have the trained workforce, and he doesn't want to absorb those training costs up front in order to get in business. And the problem with bringing a bunch of people in is nobody can afford to live here. So that's going to be a deterrent to bringing new people in, new employers. We need to work on that. Old Litton and Morrison created RCC and did a lot of training through there, and so companies that I worked for took people from that and were able to prosper here, but those days are somewhat gone. There's probably some opportunity for some new vocational programs out at RCC, but those are the kind of things we need to incentivize. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob?
I think that council should incentivize the building of low and middle income housing, which would also be known as workforce housing, continuing down the current path of building thousands more 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot, $400,000 homes that are out of reach is not going to take us out of our housing shortage. We need multifamily housing, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and what came out of a recent council workshop with the home builders, several of them were suggesting that a new model type of home would be more like a 900 to 1,000 square foot home that could actually be affordable and could be, the rents could be affordable and something like that as well. We currently have several funding sources to address this. This council, specifically in the last year, has created 3 new funding sources to pay for the incentivization so that we pay as we go. And I think we did a really good job with those. So there's many ways to essentially help the development community at this point. Otherwise, developers are going to continue to build whatever projects are easiest for them to finance, build and sell. And our middle housing needs are not going to go met. I think that what I want to see happen, because we have so much input, I mean, we got a report a little while ago that was really excellent. It was 3 different groups as to why they, feel that, what needs to happen. But the fact is, we have so much data on what needs to happen. I think that we need to reserve a spot on the council agenda at a workshop every single month where we bring together the community development director, the housing specialist, the housing advisory committee chairman, and someone from the home builders and any other developers. So on a monthly basis, we can hold ourselves accountable as to see exactly what we're doing and how we're meeting our goals. Because if you have a deadline every month, we're going to make a lot more progress. Getting a report every 6 months puts things on the shelf for the next 5 months in many people's minds. That hasn't been working. That's gotten us to where we are right now. So I want to see the staff and the council, the development community hold ourselves accountable once a month. That way, if there is a particular need that a developer needs, whether it's for an infill project and they need help with infrastructure, or whether it's a good piece of property that might just be too expensive that would make a really good project for a multifamily project, the developer can bring it to us on a month-by-month basis so the council can act. Because I don't really want to hear as a councilor 6 months or a year later all the things we should have done in the prior year, all the ways we could have helped them. So I feel that we really need to be on it. We need to take the tools we have, because we have extensive tools, and we now have at least 4 or 5 funding mechanisms, at least 3 or 4 of which this council created. We need to begin to use them, and we need to begin to, in a very focused way, remember they're there and have discussions with the development community and make sure that they know and their bankers know what help we can give them on a month-by-month basis.
All right, thank you. Molly?
Okay. So I am on the Housing Advisory Committee as well, so this is a topic I'm pretty comfortable with. I agree with Clint, absolutely, economic development is key, but our average citizen in Grants Pass already makes $50,000 a year, which is pretty decent money. It means that they can afford a rent of $1,300 and a mortgage of $1,900. That mortgage would buy them a home roughly at $240,000, which is also a pretty decent mortgage amount. Unfortunately, there's one available in Grants Pass currently. It's on K Street, and it needs some work. So I don't know what jobs Clint envisions that are going to be paying more than $50,000 a year to start with, but those people would not be able to afford to live here. So we have to create that housing to bring that economic development in. The city is already doing some pretty amazing things. They've given a grant to the Home Bridges program for public infrastructure, almost $400,000. They are working with a multifamily developer currently for affordable housing over on the Ramsey side of town. And they've been doing some really creative loans on that property to make that happen. We need to continue those economic incentives and that creativity that they are showing. And one of those is by creating incentives for builders who are going to build those 700 to 900 square foot homes at affordable rates.
Thank you. Now we're going to take a question from the audience. And Clint, we'll start with you. What is the best way in terms of fairness and efficiency to fund the law enforcement?
There's a lot of ideas that need to come up with, people need to come up with. I don't have the specific answer for that. I think there's some creative ways that we can work with the Sheriff's Department. It's a topic that needs more exploring, as the current government is basically doing that right now. The one issue I do have is if our city is using abundance of resources to prop up the building industry and they can't pay for their own police, I think we're kind of approaching a different topic at a failure. Your current council is going about tackling all of these problems at a certain direction, and they have not been successful on a number of occasions, and we still don't have a way to fund the police. I don't have the ultimate answer. It's something that I will try to bring some creative ideas to the table. but it is going to be a challenge. There might be a point where the community needs to figure out what the level of service they're willing to afford. Currently, the city is propping up the police department and paying for a majority of that police department. So the citizens are getting their police department at a discounted rate. They're getting their services at that discounted rate. So it might be a hard truth for the community that they have to determine their level of service. But there are ideas out there. I don't have the exact one yet.
All right, thank you. Dwayne?
Very good question. I think that question's probably been asked by so many people that have sat in this seat for many years. I can remember as a child the same question, law enforcement. We have definitely kept putting that idea, well, the O&C funds will come back. They're gone. They're not coming back. And I don't think they ever will come back. So people definitely need to make a decision. Do they want law enforcement? Do they want firefighters? That's a question that people need to answer. And what are those services they want? If they don't want them, there is going to be repercussions for not having law enforcement. And people need to understand that. The stuff is not free. I understand it's expensive. I get it. Who wants to pay more money? But at some point, we will have to have something done. We have to have law enforcement. We have to have firefighters. People are, when you say sales tax, people run in this county. They don't like it. Some other states have sales tax and they work fine. They don't have other things. But here in this county, in the city, you say sales tax and it's going to be a big zero. So I don't think definitely where that is the answer. I wish it would help, but I don't think the people want that. And that's what I have to go with, is what the people want. And people got to listen to that back in 2012 when they voted no for all the sheriff's department, and they got what they asked for.
All right, thank you. Kurt?
A year ago this time, I was spending every Saturday canvassing for the levy. And is that a way to fund? It isn't. To leave it up to the whims of the people every year. If you're a policeman and you want to live here, you want to make this your home, can you go out and buy a house based on the fact that you don't know if you'll be employed next year? Those are all difficult things. The sales tax, Dan DeYoung mentioned that to me 3-4 years ago when we were on budget committee together. And I thought that was an excellent, because it was a fairest idea. It spread it across everybody. I grew up paying sales tax. It wasn't a big deal. I knew when I went in a store, I automatically calculated what it was going to cost. It's 3 cents. It's a rounding error. And the fact is, the people will have their say, and if they choose not to, then we'll have to come up with plan B, C, D, E, whatever. But I do support the sales tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I'm not sure if correction is appropriate now, but people make it sound like, Clint and others made it sound like we don't have police now in the city. Our city police department is fully funded. The levy has been passed uninterruptedly. Well, we've had uninterrupted levy supplementation for probably a decade and a half. So we've had a pretty stable funding source, a lot more stable than a sales tax might be, especially if we had any kind of a retail shutdown like we had with COVID. The sales tax would dry up completely. But we are fully funded, and I believe last budget cycle, I don't believe that our chief hensman actually asked for any increases. He said that he could run a good department with the money that we have now. So I think that the council took that at face value, and that's what we're doing. I think that transportation and utility fees, possibly with voter approval, need to really be looked at. Right now, we have about 1,000 properties in our city that nonprofits own. $330 million worth of real estate. If we took out the schools and the government, we'd still have over $150 million worth of real estate that is not paying into our levy. It's unfair. That would translate at $1.79 per thousand to about $300,000 a year of increase revenue for the police department if we could actually tap into what the nonprofits are not paying. They get police and fire service, they just don't pay it. I don't think that's fair. The staffing and the resources for implementing that are in place already too.
All right, thank you. Molly?
Okay, so maybe the county gets a discounted rate for law enforcement, but we in the city do not. Our public safety budget is roughly $20 million a year, and the majority of our property taxes go to that budget, more than 90% actually. And we have a high rate of service, a high level of service in the city, luckily, thankfully. I definitely appreciate that, but the levy does create uncertainty. It is hard to maintain the highly skilled and trained workforce that our public safety does a great job in doing, and we do consistently lose those wonderful community members to other locations that have stable funding. One of the ideas that is proposed is the sales tax. I don't think that most of us like it. It does seem fair, but it does disproportionately affect the lowest incomes among us. Looking forward, that levy passes consistently. Like Rob said, it's been passed for almost 15 years consistently. It may just be time to use our state representative and go back to Salem and see if we can actually affirm that into our base tax rate. We could also look at adding in another utility fee, which I'm sure none of us would appreciate, but we do appreciate the level of service that we currently enjoy. And I'd like to keep that personally.
Thank you. Joel?
Well, just the concept of having a functional public safety department is essential for any aspect of our community, whether it's economic development, whether it's those that are less fortunate and don't have a home, the kids. So it is essential. Without it, those that have the biggest gun determines what's right. And we got some people with pretty big guns, especially out in the county. The other thing is there's a relationship between the city and the county, whether it's homelessness. If the city does one thing with homelessness, it affects what happens in the county and vice versa. And so there's a relationship between what happens in the city and the county, not only with homelessness, but with law enforcement. And I know when we were private business owners during the last failure of the county levy, we lost $10,000 to an ex-con that robbed our place, and I had a confrontation with him. It was not good who had the biggest gun. There's several different ways. We got the sales tax that's coming up for vote. We need to respect the whim of the people on that and the wishes. We got property taxes, we got utility fees, we got franchise fees. And I would say for equity, we probably need to look at all of them and not depend on just one segment of our community to fund public safety.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question, and this question was submitted by multiple people. So Dwayne, we're going to start with you. What is the responsibility and role of the city government in dealing with homelessness crisis we have in Grants Pass?
Great question. Obviously, the courts have said one thing. I think the people said another thing. So we have a little conflict of what people think the city should be doing. I think that's definitely controversial about how we solve this issue as a city council and as a city. I believe there's a couple different groups of people that we need to look at it. Maybe we can help and what we can't help. There's obviously, we've talked about here a little bit about people can't afford something. I think there's some elderly people out there that probably going to need some help, and I think the city could probably step up and help those type of people that they're just not going to make more money. They're too old. They're living in their car or something like that. That's definitely something the city can help. Then you got this second group. It's mental health and drugs. Measure 110 was passed, and the city was put. We were going to get all this funding for treatment and mental health. That's just now coming out. Josephine County just got their money released here about a month and a half ago. I know that because I'm a realtor and I'm working with the group. And then we have, we're starting to get treatment, but there's no place to send those people. So as a city council, I think we can encourage those things to help facilitate the mental health and the drug addiction people that, take care of them. We can take care of the homeless that are elderly. And that third group I think we haven't talked about is the ones that are just pushing the limit and don't want any help. And that's the one we need to really use law enforcement with.
All right, thank you. Kurt?
I'd say I've been asking myself that question for a couple of years now. I mean, the homelessness is a very complex thing. There's no one cause for it. If I go down and I talk to people, as Joel has also, if I talk to 100 people, I'll get 100 different reasons why they're in the situation they're in. And it's wrong to just paint them all as mentally ill or drug addicts. That's not right. But the reason they're here isn't really right either. I mean, we didn't ask for this, but we have to deal with it. It's kind of like Donald Rumsfeld said, we go to work every day with the city we have, not the city we want. And so we're working on this problem, and unfortunately a lot of people want to fix the blame and not fix the problem. So we're working on incremental solutions. It's really not the high cost of housing that's caused this. It's more than that. It's individual people's decisions that have steered them in the certain direction they're in. And all we can do is make the best of it. And I think, as humans, we have to have empathy for these people, and they need a hand up. And if we can create a transitional program, give them that hand up, help them, then they'll help themselves and move on through the system and back into society. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob?
Homeless issues are extraordinarily complex, both locally and nationally. Especially, obviously, we all know locally we have a federal injunction that essentially ties the council's hands and the police department's hands to take back our parks immediately, even though that's what the rallying cry is for some, take back the parks. Unfortunately, the feds don't really say that we can do that, not immediately. First and foremost, we need a low barrier shelter, which is pretty much as per the court's ruling. It could be an outdoor facility, it could be a combination, indoor and outdoor. Such a facility would first and foremost provide the number one thing that all the experts say that any homeless person needs is stability. They need to know where they're going to sleep that night. And their case manager needs to know where they can find them the next day. So we need a low barrier shelter first and foremost. That can then double as or become part of or morph into a navigation center. At a navigation center, case managers will hold the residents accountable for making their appointments. We then need to, and they can also begin to ascertain who needs a hand up, who's going to use that to become a contributing member of society, and who just wants a perpetual handout. In the long term, those are two very different groups. As a sitting councilor, I have to be very careful with what I say. We don't want anything a sitting councilor says to be used in the next lawsuit against us. But those are two different groups that will be handled differently. Those that can use a hand up versus those that are looking for a perpetual handout.
Thank you. Molly?
Okay, so back to that house on K Street. That house used to rent for $650 a month, and at its current sales price of $230, the mortgage with taxes, principal mortgage insurance, and just general house insurance actually comes to $1995. That's a substantial increase from $650. So the person who did rent that long-term for $650 no longer has an option. If they want to find something of the same genre, it's going to average about $1,400 a month now for a rental. A lot of those people live in our parks, and a lot of those people are people that are long-term community members. They're elderly. They're the parents of kids I went to school with. They're friends of ours. Unfortunately, the Blake versus the City of Grants Pass lawsuit is against the City of Grants Pass, not against any of our local nonprofits. So the only people who can solve that lawsuit and give us back our ability to enforce our quality of life laws is the City of Grants Pass, mainly the City Council. So I believe that the City Council has an obligation to create the low barrier shelter options. That is the reason that lawsuit won against the City of Grants Pass, because we do not have any options for those community members.
Thank you. Joel?
So any issue is a three-legged stool. For it to be successful, if you only have two legs to the stool, it collapses and doesn't work. The three legs are, first off, is social acceptability. So we need to obey the law, and the judge is part of that. He didn't say it was a Homestead Act in Riverside Park. He said it was cruel and unusual punishment for people not to rest in Riverside Park. And he set criteria around that. So that's the law. We need to follow that. In terms of other social acceptability, we need to work with our community. And we had a homeless workshop earlier this year. It was supported by part of the City Council. It wasn't supported by others. But where we got about 80 people together and nonprofits, and we sat down, including homeless people, and looked at different solutions. And it worked out really well. I got the report here if you're interested in it. One of the things they talked about was we presently have over 80 nonprofits working on this issue. Senate and House Bill 4123 now has set some pilot projects where they have a facilitator facilitating the nonprofits to work on all the things that were previously talked about. It's not an or issue, it's an and. And when you have that many resources working together, it's doable. If we just focus on one avenue, one funding source, one nonprofit, we run into problems.
All right, thank you. Clint?
I gotta take a breath on this. All right, I'm absolutely done being bullied about this. This is crap. The city local government is not a facilitator of social services. If the council keeps facilitating social services without bringing economic drivers behind it, they're flipping our scale upside down. We have more social services in this community than we have jobs for people. The problem with this is we need to stand up for our city. The community should be the driver whether we want to provide these services or not. The community over the last 20 months has come out numerous times and told local government they do not want this. Local government stands back and says, oh, well, not in my neighborhood, that's the not in my neighborhood people. No, but when multiple communities come out and say that, then it's not in my community. It should be community driven. The local government should provide facilities, should provide finances, should provide access to government funding that is available. They should not be in the owning and operating and facilitating of the social services. That is dependent on the community organizations, churches, and so forth. If the community wants it, then they will provide it. You can't go to Martha's Vineyard and get in a shelter because that community doesn't want it.
All right, thank you. So our time went by really fast. So we're already an hour, we're at 7 p.m. So we're gonna do wrap up comments. And Kurt, we're back to you again. So you have 2 minutes for your wrap up comments.
All right. You know, for each question I sat and I thought about it as it came around to me, and then I started, and there was always something left over at the end of my answer. So that's my fault. So how would I wrap this up? Well, you'll notice that you don't drive around Grants Pass and see a bunch of signs from me. I was asked the other day by my ex-wife if I was running for council, and I said, well, it's more like I'm strolling. I have a problem with campaigning, and I hate campaign ads, and I think that's a big part of our problem in our political area. So I just want to say, you know, the people that know me, they know who I am, they'll vote for me. There's a lot of people in this town that know me. And I'm not here to promote a business. I don't have an ideology that guides my every breath. I'm just a guy who cares about the city. I've lived here for a long time, and I try to consider all sides of every issue and then make the best decision I can for the city. And I've done that consistently while I've been on council, and I'll continue to do so. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I appreciate your work on the council, Kurt. And, you know, I have to comment, I just have to comment, that we've had local polls, and the fact is, regardless of what Clint may say, the fact is the people actually have indicated very strongly that they want the council to do something about the homeless issue. And it doesn't really matter whether you are whether you love the homeless, would take them into your home, or whether you despise the homeless and wish they weren't on planet Earth. The fact is, whatever side of that issue you're on, the situation we have now is untenable. It's not good, and it's not without the city council taking a role of leadership, whether that is facilitating grants, whether that is providing focused direction. The fact is the public wants that problem worked on. So we can't just make flippant comments about Martha's Vineyard or whatever. So I just like to say that I definitely appreciate working with who I do on the council. I really, I feel that there's not anyone on the council that I cannot call on a Sunday afternoon or Friday evening. I don't have any polar opposites on the council. I have no enemies on the council. And I feel that I'm willing to work with everybody. And regardless of who gets elected, I would make the same overtures. I feel that any first-year counselors may need some additional help. If you listen to what Valerie had to say or DJ had to say, they said that their first year, they were not very effective. So we really need to bring first-year counselors up to speed, if any of them were to win, and because that'll make the entire council more effective. Anyway, I hope that I have another 4 years to work on some of the things that we've gotten started, because I really think that we set the table now for some tremendous successes if next year's council wants to take the baton from us and be constructive with what we set up.
All right, thank you. Molly?
All right. Well, mainly I'm running for city council because I have a deep love and passion for our community, and I see our community struggling. I pretty much raised my children in Riverside Park. I've been going to concerts in the park there for as long as they've been going on, so at least 20 years. It was a real shame this year to have them at the fairgrounds. It didn't feel the same. We did have a lot of community involvement, which was great, but it just wasn't the same. Our current council has not been able to move forward with any substantial solution for this unhoused population that is currently living, not just resting, but living in our parks. They have not been able to move our economic growth forward either, probably in part because of the affordable housing issue and the homeless encampments in our park. The majority of our citizens want this solved. And Rob is right, whether you get there because you care about the homeless or you get there because you don't want to see the homeless, we all get to the same conclusion that we want our public spaces for public use, not for private living. And the majority of the people in those parks, I think, would probably agree with that as well. They don't want to be there. They don't want to have their issues on display. So with over 10 years experience in negotiating, I've developed that keen ability to find creative solutions to most obstacles. I've successfully negotiated over 400 contracts with every personality type that you can imagine. And the ability to negotiate a positive outcome for everybody at the table is a unique skill, and one that is sorely missing on council right now, and one that I will happily bring to our community and utilize for all of us.
Thank you. Joel?
So it's all about relationships, and I know people get tired of that. We just went to the League of Oregon Cities, and they gave us example where the health of your relationships determine the outcome of the success of the city. And it doesn't involve the city all the time, but it does involve city facilitation. Right now, about 200 people a year are being helped off the street by the existing nonprofits. The point in count in time 2 years ago was about between 600 and 700. There is not we're not in this alone. There is, the mayor of Portland the other day said Well, it's obvious to everybody after we spent millions and millions of dollars in a lot of infrastructure, we failed. And that's happened all up and down the West Coast, so don't feel alone. And there's not going to be an easy answer. But what I do know is that a sense of community and cohesion and infrastructure within the community goes a long ways. A good example is what our keynote speaker said at the League of Oregon Cities, where there was a heat wave in Chicago and the deaths were highly proportionate in the South Side. And there were two communities side by side in the South Side. One had a lot of deaths and the other one didn't. And they were both predominantly black, both predominantly poor. And the difference was the one city had a public infrastructure. They had a library that was open. They had parks that the grass wasn't 2 feet high. People had relationships. So if your neighbor wasn't outside, somebody would check on them and they would fill up the bathtub full of cold water and save that person's life. In the other community, they were scared to go outside and they died in their house. Big difference, sense of community. So part of what the council needs to facilitate is this sense of community, and richness of our relationships overcomes scarcity of resources.
Thank you. Clint?
Thank you. Local government, federal government doesn't make money. They're a facilitator, they are a manager of your money, tax dollars. So I'm going to state this again. A council should serve the community. The council should listen to the community. The council should promote growth within that community so its citizens can prosper. It should always listen to the community because realistically, we are managing that community's dollars. If the community wants to spend their dollars in certain ways, they should have a voice in that. It shouldn't be the whim of the council to do what they want and push their agenda. I personally want you to take a step back and see what's happened to our city in the last 20 months, see how our current government has managed all of our city. And then take a look at me. I want to bring some fresh ideas, some new voices to the council. I want to listen to the community. I want to protect, serve, and make this community prosperous. You guys can see with your own eyes what's happened over the last couple of years, shy of 2 years. I think people are arguing it's going in the wrong direction and it hasn't been successful. So let's take a different approach. Let's look at it from a different angle. Thanks.
Thank you. Dwayne?
I think you're right, Joel. Our government has failed us. The state, our city has failed us. Are we better off than we were 2 years, 4 years ago? I would say no, we're not. 4 years ago, it wasn't like that out there. We didn't have this homeless problem. 2 years ago, we didn't have this. So as some of the ones that are on the council right now say they're working for it, but 2 years ago, we didn't have this problem. 4 years ago, it's gotten worse. What have they been doing for the last 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, however long they've been on this council? Rob and Kurt, they're for sales tax. I'm a conservative. I think the people know what they want. That's California. If you want California, you vote for Kurt and Rob. I don't want a sales tax. I'd move to California, and you can see how that place is failing. Rob also said that the funding has been great for the firefighters and the police officers here in the city. Well, I just met with the firefighters last Wednesday, and they would say no. I met with all of them, the whole union. $7 million, they said, or somewhere around there, but they actually need $9.5 million to fund their department. They have old equipment they tell me about. They have old vehicles. And these are people that have been on the council for years. They should know this stuff. They should know that the firefighters have old equipment, but they're telling you differently. I ask yourself this: are we better off now than we were 2 years or 4 years ago? If not, you need to vote for me and stop putting people that have been in here for years and having the same outcome. Thank you.
All right, thank you. A big thank you to all the candidates for coming out tonight and those attending in person and online. This has been recorded and will be available on the Chamber YouTube's channel, so please share it with anyone interested. And we will be back here next Tuesday at 6 p.m. for the Sheriff and County Commissioner race as well. So I hope you will also join us then.
Thank you,
And
Josie.
Thank you. Have a great night.